Good morning, Women to Watch. It is my honor to spend a few minutes with you to talk a little bit about what I like to call the pearls of intentional leadership. As you probably know, I've had the privilege of being in financial services on Wall Street for, as of this summer, for 33 years. And I dare say that I've also had the opportunity to sit at the feet of some amazing leaders and frankly, not so much. And as I reflected on my 3 decades on Wall Street, I realized that very much like you, I had also grown up in a producer culture, which means that if you are a great producer, you are rewarded not only with outsized compensation, but also with promotions and titles and often seats of authority, leadership, and managing other people without any thought as to whether or not you are the kind of person that could motivate and inspire people to deliver beyond that which they thought they could do, or whether or not you're the kind of person that could actually see opportunity amidst chaos, or whether or not you're the kind of person that could pivot or could transform a culture amidst a tumultuous context. And frankly, that is the environment that we find ourselves in right now, which means there is a different type of leadership that is required in this moment. Now, I'm also going to argue that it wasn't just the global pandemic, or it wasn't just the social unrest on the backs of the racial injustice in this country that have created a different appetite and need, and frankly, requirement for different leadership. I would argue that it was actually happening before this moment. And it's the fact that millennials and Zers are quickly becoming the dominant population in the workforce. And they demand as table stakes three things. They demand transparency, inclusivity, and feedback. And if you're a boomer or an older Xer, you know you didn't get a lot of feedback along your career journey. You were told, keep your head down, work really hard. If you don't get fired, you know you're doing okay. And that kind of my way or the highway leadership style will never do in this kind of environment. It will not thrive in this kind of environment. So the question is, how do you need to show up every day if you want to be perceived as a powerful, impactful, influential leader? And I argue that you have to be intentional. And you have to be intentional around 8 things, or the 8 pearls, as I call them, my hard-earned and hard-learned pearls after spending 3 decades on Wall Street. The first of these pearls is authenticity. Your authenticity is your distinct competitive advantage. Nobody can be you the way that you can be you. And the day that you received your current opportunity, somebody else didn't get the job because you were the best person for the job. So the last thing any of us should ever do is to submerge that which is uniquely you. Anytime that you're trying to speak or behave in a way that is inauthentic to who you really are, that's when you create the competitive disadvantage, because you're using valuable intellectual capacity that you could use to really hear what your client or your team is saying, yet is not articulating. Valuable intellectual capacity that you could use to demonstrate that quick twitch response, and valuable intellectual capacity that you could use to co-create in the moment with that person on the other side of the conversation. As quiet as it's kept, ladies and gentlemen, most people are not comfortable in their own skin. So when they see someone who is comfortable and confident in their skin, they will gravitate towards you. If you are choosing today to sit in a leadership seat, it is imperative that you bring your authentic self to the table. When you bring your authentic self to the table in any environment, then you motivate and inspire those who are working with you. Notice I said with and not for. Those who are working with you to bring their authentic selves into that environment. And anytime any of us is in an environment where we can be who we really are, we will always outperform. And that will now accrue to your status in that leadership seat. I will tell you that when we went into this shelter-in-place protocol in the middle of March, I began receiving phone calls from C-suite leaders across all industries. The questions were, how do I lead in this kind of environment? How do I motivate and inspire my people when we're not under the same roof? How do I keep people focused on the objective at hand and continue to be productive in this quarter and in the next quarter? And it was interesting to me that these leaders found themselves amidst this type of crisis when they never thought that during their leadership legacy, they would have to manage something like this, that they would have to pivot a culture that's used to being more internal and not making external statements to a culture where they have to stand and deliver where they are in this society and speak in a way that they had never spoken before, and be mindful of external and internal constituencies. And I said to these leaders, at a minimum, you must do three things. You must be visible, you must be transparent, and you must be empathetic. In this environment that is full of uncertainty, people are craving stability. They're craving some signs of certainty. And you must make sure that you are visible with your people, even through these digital mediums. Because at a minimum, if they can see you, it is a substitute for the stability that they are craving at this time, because they are used to being able to see you and used to being able to be in the same place. So at a minimum, you must communicate so that they can see you. The second, you must be transparent about what you know and what you don't know and when you know it. Here's how we're thinking about coming back into the office. Here are the three things that we are looking for in order to give us a signal as to when we should go back. Here are the things that we don't know and we're not sure of, but let me tell you how we're managing around that uncertainty. You must be transparent about what you know and what you don't know and when you know it. Why? It underscores your authenticity. And when you are sharing information, you deepen the relationships that you have with your people who don't have access to that information. And more importantly, because you're in the business that you're in and I'm in the business that I am in, we get information that other people don't have access to. So when you share that information with your clients, you also deepen the relationships with your clients at a time that you can engage with them around a sale. The third thing is that you must be empathetic. Now's the time to say things to your team like, I know you must be feeling some kind of way. I'm feeling some kind of way. But let me tell you how I'm managing it every day. Let me tell you what I say to myself in order to drive my own productivity. Let me tell you how I'm managing to make sure that the professional doesn't bleed into too much of the personal and vice versa, and that my days don't become longer at work while I'm in this home context. Again, sharing these tools, sharing these strategies are ways to not only underscore your authenticity, but it's a way to build trust. And it's a way to build the relationship currency that will deepen your relationships with your clients and your internal people. Now is not the time as a leader to behave as if what we're all going through is not impacting you. That's the old leadership style, to show no empathy, to show no vulnerability. This is the first time in my professional career, and probably yours, where we are truly having a shared experience. This is not something that's just happening in the United States. It's not something that's happening in some remote country. This is the first time this is a global experience. And now is the time to underscore and enhance your leadership capital by showing some empathy. The second pearl that you must be intentional about if you want to be a powerful, impactful, influential leader is building trust. We are all competing in some way around innovation. It is the dominant competitive parameter across all industries. And if you agree with me that we are competing in some way around innovation, that means as a leader, you know that you will be going into territories unknown. And all great leaders understand that you cannot do it alone. You cannot do it alone. You will need somebody else's intellect, somebody else's experience, and somebody else's access to a relationship in order to successfully prosecute any endeavor. And in order to get access to your team's intellect, experience, and their networks, and everybody has a network, they must trust you. They must trust you. So the $64,000 question is, how do you build trust? The way that you build trust is that you simply deliver over and over and over again. When I think about how I try to build trust and build relationships with clients, I try to think of 4 things that I can do for them before I ever ask for anything. And people will always tell you what they trust and what they value. So in order to get them to trust you, you must understand what they value so that you can deliver on it. which means you must create the space so that they will tell you what they value. So let's say I've had a conversation with a client and they've told me that they're an avid runner. So maybe then I say to the client, hey, listen, I have a group of friends that are running the Berlin Marathon. I understand that you're running the marathon. Can I connect you to them so that when you land, there's a community that you can engage with? Because I understand that there's currency and connections. Maybe I say, hey, have you tried the new Nike shoe? I understand that they have created some unbelievable support for long distance runners. I know someone who can talk to you about the shoe. Oh, by the way, can I introduce you to my sister? She's an orthopedic surgeon. Every runner needs to have an orthopod on speed dial. Oh, by the way, here's an article I thought that you might enjoy. I try to think of 4 things that they might value before I ever ask for anything, so that by the time I ask for something, they say, wow, I wasn't thinking about giving Morgan Stanley any of that business, but Carla's done A, she's done B, she's done C, she's done D. Maybe I'll give them a little bit of this transaction. And ladies and gentlemen, that's all I need is a little bit of an opening. I can wiggle my hips through that and land and expand. More importantly, they trust me enough to give me the shot. The third thing that you must be intentional about if you want to be a powerful, impactful, influential leader is creating clarity. Now, I know I've just said that we are all competing around innovation, which means you are going to go into territories unknown. But as a powerful, impactful, influential leader, it is your job to create clarity even when you cannot see. It is your job to define what success looks like for the team, even if you are unsure. When people are clear about what success looks like, i.e. what they are playing for, then I believe as humans, we are motivated to outperform and deliver more than that which has been defined. But if people are not clear on what success looks like, you create a tremendous amount of frustration on the food chain. You know that you should be able to get more out of your team and you don't understand why you're not getting it. They know that you're not happy, but they don't know what it takes to get you to happy. So it is your job to define what success looks like. And oh, by the way, don't worry about making a mistake. If you start on a journey and you realize that you've made a mistake and it's the wrong path, then you take a page out of the technology industry's playbook. You fail fast. You take the blessings, you extract the blessings of the lesson from that endeavor, and you use it to invest in the next try and hopefully impact the next success. But you cannot fail to define what success looks like, especially in an environment that is characterized by so much uncertainty. It will create paralysis. You will lose productivity on your team. And in an environment like this, where you cannot touch your people, you are apt to lose some of your best talent. The next thing that you must be intentional about is creating other leaders. When you get to the leadership seat, if you are choosing to sit in the leadership seat, you must be disproportionately focused on creating other leaders. That is how you amplify your impact in your organization. Heretofore, your organization may have been valuing you because you were an outstanding individual contributor. You were a master executor. But once you get to the leadership seat, the organization is dependent upon you to create other leaders, because that is how they also expand their footprint. That is how they are competitive with respect to gaining more market share. That is how they can stay on the edge of innovation, by creating other leaders who think differently and who can innovate in a way that the past leadership has not been able to do. Your job, leaders, is to create other leaders if you are choosing to sit in a leadership seat. Now, this was an interesting lesson for me because I am a master executor. Left to my own devices, I will execute, execute, execute. I derive my joy from taking things off the list. But I realized that when I accepted the leadership seat, I had to think differently. And the way that I actually helped myself along the journey, because after all, leadership is a journey from execution to empowerment. The way that I helped myself along the journey is I thought about this as imagery. I used a little baseball imagery. I said, Carla Harris, the outstanding executor, the woman who has executed many transactions that have generated millions of dollars of revenue for the firm, she's standing on first base. But Carla, The outstanding leader, the person that can motivate and inspire people to deliver beyond that which they thought that they could do, the person that could transform a culture amidst a tumultuous context, that person, she's standing on second base. Carla, you cannot get to second base with your foot still on first. You have to be willing to let that go. Those things that allowed you to cut your leadership teeth, you must be intentional about giving those things to other people so that they can cut their leadership seat. And you must be mindful to leave room for them to do it differently, for them to innovate. The second thing that really helped me along the journey is that I heard my chairman say one day that he focuses on only those things that the CEO can do. If anybody else on his team can execute anything on his list, it should not be on his list, because he wants to focus on only those things that the CEO can do. Translation in my mind, ladies and gentlemen, Carla, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Leaders, just because you can doesn't mean you should. You should leave ample room for you to fully evolve and be intentional about that evolution into a powerful, impactful, influential leader by being intentional about creating other leaders. The next pearl that you must be intentional about is diversity. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you that diversity does not just happen. We are all vulnerable to unconscious bias, and I will give you an example of my own. I've had the privilege and the honor of creating a multicultural innovation lab within Morgan Stanley. It's the only in-house accelerator of any investment bank on the street. We bring in 10 companies per year that have been founded by women and multicultural entrepreneurs, and we give them three things. We give them cash, we give them 6 months of content to help them to develop from being a founder to a CEO, because you know there's a difference. And we also give them connections to some of our larger investment banking clients to help advance the scaling of their business. 18 months into the journey of building that lab and building a team, I looked up and my entire team was women. Oh, it was multicultural, but the entire team was women. Not an ounce of testosterone to be seen anywhere. And I knew immediately that I had a gap in my go-to-market strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do not have diverse thinking at your decision-making table, you will have a gap in your go-to-market strategy, and you will unnecessarily expose yourself to competition that could actually come and displace you as a leader in your space. So it is important that you are intentional about making sure that you have diverse thinking at your table. And as a powerful leader, you must rail against the unconscious bias that is common in all of us. Here's a thought for you around the business case around diversity. If you agree with me that we are all in some way competing around innovation, then you must agree with me that it takes a lot of ideas to get to that one innovative idea that will allow you to obtain and retain a leadership position in your industry. Because after all, innovation is born from ideas. If you need a lot of ideas in the room, you need a lot of perspectives in the room, because ideas are born from perspectives. If you need a lot of perspectives in the room, you need a lot of experiences in the room, because perspectives are born from experiences. And if you need a lot of experiences in the room, you better start with a lot of different people in the room, because experiences are born from people. So you must start with a lot of different people in the room to get to that one innovative idea that will allow you to obtain and retain a leadership position in your industry. And if you're not with me yet, let me give you one last thought. When I walked out of the halls of Harvard Business School in 1987, excellence in leadership in corporate America looked like 6 white men at the top. That's exactly right. 6 white men at the top. Pick the industry, pick the company, IBM, General Motors, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Procter & Gamble. And I knew that as a woman of color, if I wanted to play, I had to be comfortable being the first and the only in many of these rooms. But that is not the case for millennials today. They have seen women lead. They have seen women in the C-suite. They might have a mother in the C-suite, or they might have a mother that's running the highest profile nonprofit in their industry or their city or their town. They have gone to these elite schools where a smart kid on the right is a smart African-American kid, smart kid on the left, smart Hispanic kid, smart kid in the front and the back, smart Indian, and American Indian or Asian kid, respectively. That's what excellence looks like to them. So when they are thinking about the companies that they want to work for, if they don't see their definition of excellence, they're not apt to go. And every company, especially in financial services, likes to feel that they are the employer of choice. But if you cannot exemplify their version of excellence, they're not likely to come. And oh, by the way, this generation cares very much about the jersey that they're wearing. Those of us who might be boomers or traditionalists or even Xers, we cared a lot about the opportunity, the career trajectory, the platform, maybe even the compensation. But millennials and Zers care about the jersey that they're wearing. They care that the companies they are choosing to work with, that they are aligned with their values. So it's important that you exemplify that excellence. The next thing that you must be intentional about is innovation. I think that I have made the case today that it is the dominant competitive parameter across all industries. So in order to make sure that your team is intentional about innovating, you must teach them how to innovate. How do you teach people how to innovate? You must teach them how to fail, especially when millennials and Zers are deathly afraid of failing. How do you teach them how to fail? You must celebrate the failures. When someone on your team takes a risk and it doesn't work out, as a powerful, impactful, influential leader, you must be very careful about how you react. If you have an adverse reaction, then the person on the other end of that conversation and the people who are witnessing that conversation, they will never take that risk again. As my grandmother used to say, a burnt child is afraid of fire. So instead of reacting in an adverse manner, you might want to say, oh, wow, Dan, that one's going to cost us. That was a huge mistake. That will probably cost us this quarter. But let's give Dan a hand because he took the risk. And because he took the risk, we have now learned these 3 things. And now we can take these learnings and hopefully impact our next success. It is important that you get your team in the habit of failing, because if they are afraid to fail, they will never reach far enough to truly innovate. And the way that you innovate is to reach far enough until you hit the wall that will allow you to go to market. And then once you've hit that wall and you have a product in the market, now the goal is to make sure that you go through that wall and get to the next level. And every time they hit the wall, you know they have gone as far as they can go in that iteration of innovation. But I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, especially with millennials and Zers, you must teach this. They do not have a muscle of failing because, frankly, as boomer or Xer or traditionalist parents, we have not allowed them to fail in the way that we were allowed to fail as we embarked on our career journey. The next thing that you must be intentional about as a powerful, impactful, influential leader is inclusivity. I have the privilege and honor of speaking at lots of companies when we weren't in this kind of environment. And generally, when I go to their campus, they say to me, well, since you're on a campus, can you spend an hour with the CEO and his or her direct reports? And invariably, behind closed doors, the question comes up, how do you show up as an inclusive leader? Ladies and gentlemen, the way that you show up every day intentionally as an inclusive leader is that you must solicit other people's voices. You must solicit other people's voices. I'd like to challenge you. The next 4 times that you bring your teams together, try the following. Here's the problem that we're trying to solve. I'm going to get us started in this conversation, but Abby, I'd like you to add on to this argument. And Bill, I'd like you to add on to what Abby has said. Now, Clarissa, I want you to play devil's advocate. Where's the gap? How would you argue the other side of what we have presented here? And Damon, I'd like you to add on to what Clarissa has just said. What have you done? You've done 2 powerful things as an impactful, influential leader. The first thing is that you've said, I see you, because you invited each of them into the conversation, each of them into the solution, each of them to reimagine the future. If you think about the context that we're in now, and you invited them in by name, which means you must engage enough with your teams in order to invite them into the conversation by name. And who doesn't value being seen by the boss? The second thing that you've done is that you said, I hear you. Not only did you invite them into the conversation by name, but you invited them in specifically to support or refute the argument that was at hand. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Everybody values being heard. Everybody values being heard. Anytime that you say to someone on the other side of the conversation that I hear you, you generate immediate currency that you can now reinvest back into that relationship. And more importantly, the intended consequence of both of those actions is that you have now put everybody's fingerprints on the blueprint. Everybody is equally invested in the success or failure of that endeavor. And then lastly, if you want to be a powerful, impactful, influential leader, especially in this context, you must be willing to call a thing, no matter how bad the thing might be. Your voice is at the heart of your power. It's when you submerge your voice that you now become irrelevant as a leader, especially during the times that we're in now. You must be willing to call a thing. Your team already knows that the company is not doing as well as it had done in the past. Your team is anticipating that there is a restructuring or a reduction in force. If you fail to give voice to that thing, now you undermine your authenticity. You undermine the relationships that you have built. And the only reason that we don't exercise our voice, which is at the heart of our power, is that we're scared. And hear me clearly, leaders, fear has no place in your success equation. Fear has no place in your success equation. And as I close, I tell you that the strand that holds each of these pearls of intentional leadership together, the strand is courage. It's courage. Because it takes courage to call a thing, especially when the thing is pretty bad. It takes courage to give voice to the things that are going on around us that you know your people are feeling, but are afraid to talk about in the context of work. As a powerful leader, you have an outsized opportunity to instigate these courageous conversations in this context. It takes courage to be intentional, to invite people into a conversation, to invite them into creating solutions, to invite them into helping you reimagine the future on the other side of this pandemic. It takes courage to be intentional about innovating, to teach people how to fail when they are deathly afraid of failing. It takes courage to be intentional around diversity. It does not just happen for any of us. It takes courage to create other leaders, especially if you are unsure of your own leadership trajectory. It takes courage to create clarity when you cannot see. It takes courage to engage enough with people to build trust, and it takes courage to bring your authentic self into any environment, which is why so many people are challenged to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be a powerful, impactful, influential leader in these challenging times, you must both expect and strategize to win. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to spend a few minutes with you this morning.